It's 7:30 in the evening across India. I'm Amritpal Singh. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global, bringing you the day's big stories from across India and the world. My colleague Nick Harper joins me from Washington, D.C. Nick, good to see you.
Good morning, Amrit. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 4 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Kamala Harris makes history as she accepts the Democratic Party's nomination, and Israel-Hamas negotiations continue amid fears of a wider regional conflict. But first, the headlines.
India's Prime Minister meets Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy in Kyiv, appeals for taking the path of peace. This is the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Ukraine. India celebrates the first National Space Day on August 23rd to commemorate the moon landing last year. The theme is touching lives while touching the moon. The Pentagon says military-to-military relationship between New Delhi and the United States is strong. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is set to meet US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in the United States. President of Congo disburses the first installment of $10 million to fight the country's Mpox outbreak. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on a visit to Ukraine held delegation-level talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy at the Mariinsky Palace in Kyiv. Reiterating India's take on peace, Prime Minister assured that India will stand by Ukraine in the exploration for peace.
हमारी पहली भूमिका रही है मानवीय दृष्टिकोण की। ऐसे संकट की घड़ी में बहुत सारी रिक्वायरमेंट रहती हैं, जिन रिक्वायरमेंट को पूरा करने के लिए भारत ने हो सका उतना एक मानवीय दृष्टिकोण को केंद्र में रखते हुए पूरा करने का प्रयास किया है। और मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि मानवीय दृष्टिकोण से भी जिस प्रकार की मदद की आवश्यकता होगी, भारत हमेशा हमेशा आपके साथ खड़ा रहेगा और दो कदम आगे चलेगा।
And while in Ukraine, Prime Minister Modi and President Zelensky held discussions to deepen economic linkages between India and Ukraine. India and Ukraine signed 4 agreements in the field of agriculture and food industry, cooperation in the field of medical product regulation, Indian humanitarian grant assistance for high-impact community development projects, and cooperation in the field of culture.
As of today, we have agreed on the 4 documents that will be signed during this truly historic visit between Ukraine and India. These are regarding the medical field, the agricultural cooperation, humanitarian dimension, and I am grateful for all of this, and I am happy to see you, Mr. Prime Minister, and glory to Ukraine.
India is providing medical assistance to Ukraine and also gifted an indigenous portable hospital, Bhisham, Cube, and other medical equipments. Both leaders held talks on a range of aspects of bilateral ties, including political, trade, economic, investments, education, cultural, people-to-people exchanges, and other areas. Prime Minister Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in 1992. And while in Ukraine, Prime Minister Modi interacted with Ukrainian students who are learning Hindi language at the School of Oriental Studies in Kyiv. Prime Minister Modi appreciated the students and commended their efforts to bring Indian culture and history closer to the Ukrainian people. And earlier in the day, Prime Minister Modi paid homage to Mahatma Gandhi at his statue. Prime Minister underscored the timeless relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's message of peace in building a harmonious society. And President Zelensky greeted Prime Minister Modi ahead of the talks. Both leaders honored the memory of Ukrainian children at the Martyrologist exposition in Kyiv. During a special briefing in Kyiv, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that the two leaders held discussions over India-Ukraine bilateral relations, trade, economic issues, defense and more.
In terms of the official discussions, I should say that he held these with President Zelenskiy. This happens to be their fourth meeting. They had met initially in Glasgow in November of 2021, then in Hiroshima in May of 2023, and then most recently in Puglia in Italy in June of 2024. They've also had 7 teleconversations. In the discussion, obviously a significant part of it was devoted to our bilateral relations. There was a discussion about trade, economic issues, defense, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, education. There were a whole lot of issues. You will see much of that reflected in the joint statement. It will be released very shortly.
And India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, who's on a 4-day visit to Washington, D.C., had a lively interaction with the Indian community. Interacting with the Indian diaspora, Rajnath Singh expressed joy to see how the Indian community continues to cherish and uphold their cultural values and maintain their connection to their roots. India and the US also signed the Security of Supplies Arrangement document, a memorandum of agreement regarding the assignment of liaison officers. Well, history was made in the electoral history of the United States on Thursday night when Kamala Harris accepted the Democratic Party's nomination, making her the first black woman and a person of South Asian descent to do so. Harris flipped the script on a lot of GOP attacks, painting herself as a regular blue-collared girl who understands the needs of the Americans, even as Trump kept up the rant of Kamala being a radical Marxist. Nick Harper is in D.C. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Amrit. The 2024 Democratic National Convention wrapped up with Kamala Harris formally accepting the Democratic Party nomination for the 2024 presidency. That was the grand finale of the 4-day event. Harris made her case to the country that she is the right person to be the next president of the US. Her path from prosecutor to politician has been defined by many firsts. She was America's first Indian-American senator and California's first female and South Asian Attorney General.
And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Harris said she will continue to stand strong with Ukraine and vowed to be a president for all Americans.
Our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. And let me say, I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
Meanwhile, former US President Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, posted live reactions to Vice President Harris's Democratic nomination acceptance speech on his Truth Social platform. Trump also posted a tweet on the social media platform X, in which he said that Harris stands for incompetence and weakness, adding that the US is being laughed at all over the world. Trump labelled Harris as a radical Marxist. On the border issue, he said she could not close the border. He further quipped that she has 4.5 months left in office, predicting his win in the November election. Moving on now, and news about the Israel-Hamas conflict. Hostage and ceasefire talks are expected to pick up again over the coming days in Cairo, as mediators look for a way to bridge gaps between Israel and Hamas after more than 10 months of fighting in Gaza. It comes as hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah are escalating amid fears of a wider regional spillover. DD India's Sarah Coates sent us this report from Tel Aviv.
Well, the pressure on both Israel and Hamas to come to an agreement, come to a ceasefire deal, just continues to mount. Although, while there is a lot of hope for this happening, there certainly is not a lot of optimism here on the ground. Now, late on Wednesday, US President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they had a phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, really pressing him on the urgency for a truce in Gaza. Now, shortly after this, his office put out a statement. It says that Israel will insist on the achievement of all its objectives of the war as they've been defined by the Security Cabinet, including that Gaza will never again constitute a security threat to Israel. Now, really, the major sticking point this time around is the control over the Philadelphia corridor. This is this very narrow strip of land that separates Egypt and Gaza. And it is a demand of Israel and the Prime Minister that there will be no withdrawal of Israeli forces from this strategic area, with Netanyahu saying that this would be a security threat given that weapon smuggling could happen from Egypt into Gaza. Now, Hamas has also demanded that Israeli forces must withdraw from that area. So certainly a lot of work to do for these key mediators over the weekend as they really try and get across the line and get this truce into play, with this truce really being seen as vital to bring down tensions in other parts of the region, including between Israel and Hezbollah, with cross-border strikes only intensifying. And we also do need to remember that this threat of retaliation from both Hezbollah and also Iran continues to loom over Israel after the assassination of two very senior figures, one of these being Fuad Shakur. He was the second in charge of Hezbollah. He was assassinated in Beirut a number of weeks ago, and just the day after that assassination was another, and this was of Ismail Haniyeh. He was the leader of Hamas's Politburo. So certainly a lot of tension in the region, and once again a lot of pressure on both of these warring parties to finally get this truce done after 10 months of fighting in not only Gaza, but also heavy conflict in Israel's north. Reporting from Tel Aviv, I'm Sarah Coates for DD India.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has held a meeting with political parties on Friday to appoint a new Prime Minister. President Macron called snap elections in early July, which left French politics in deadlock, with no party able to form a clear majority in the National Assembly. Outgoing Prime Minister Gabriel Attal's government steered France through the Paris Olympics. But with that now over, Macron needs to appoint a Prime Minister after these talks, which will continue on Monday. DD India's correspondent Ross Cullen reports with more on that story.
7 weeks on from the election that delivered a hung parliament, France still has no new government. The previous administration, including Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, is continuing for now, but only in a caretaker role. Now, the left-wing New Popular Front, they won the greatest number of seats in Parliament. They've criticised the president for procrastination and grave and damaging inaction. Well, on Friday, Emmanuel Macron acted, summoning party leaders to the Élysée Palace for talks. Now, the left-wing alliance, whose 4 parties combined have the greatest number of MPs but still fell short of a majority, well, they've proposed Lucie Castet as the new potential Prime Minister. She says she's ready to lead and form a new government, but Emmanuel Macron has, for now, ruled out appointing her as the new Premier. It means, though, that there could be a possibility of France entering uncharted territory, with opposition parties potentially coming together to form a coalition government. Now, Friday is just day one of these talks. On Monday, Emmanuel Macron is expected to host the far-right national rally, with party leader Jordan Bardella and party heavyweight Marine Le Pen expected to attend the Élysée Palace for talks. Despite being projected to win the election in July and falling short, the National Rally is actually still the single largest party in Parliament in terms of how many MPs it has. Despite that, it does seem hard to envisage the left-wing alliance or Emmanuel Macron's centrists agreeing to work alongside, in a coalition government, the Nationalist Populist Party. Ross Cullen in Paris reporting for DD India.
The Pasembe Plateau in Ordu's Abasti region has become an alternative route for tourists for the hot days of summer. The Pasembe Plateau, with its natural wonders and lake in the Black Sea region, has become a popular tourist destination, and it's hoping to host 1.5 million tourists by the end of the summer season. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Amrit, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Nick, for that, and have a good day. And as a new and a more deadlier strain of Mpox virus spreads internationally, Singapore has begun screening incoming passengers at the airport for Mpox symptoms. Temperature and visual screening will be carried out in Changi and Seletar airports from Friday onwards as a precautionary measure against Mpox, after one confirmed case of potentially more serious variant was reported in Sweden and Thailand. Meanwhile, the president of the Central African country, Democratic Republic of Congo, has allowed the first disbursement of $10 million to fight the country's Mpox. And for more on that, I'm joined by DD India's Chris Okam-Ringa. He joins us from Kinshasa. Chris, Congo's struggle to control the deadly virus is getting more desperate day by day, isn't it?
That's right. We've spoken to some health officials here who are really concerned about the number of tests that suspected cases are being done. They are saying that the figures that the government has released, about more than 17,000 people who have been infected and over 600 deaths that occurred since the beginning of this year, might be much less than what is actually happening on the ground, because very few people living in remote parts of the DRC are being tested. And so there are fears that the disease has been circulating far wider than what official figures are saying. The government has said that they are going to come up, intensify their public awareness campaigns. They want to put people at the front and center of this fight against this deadly disease. And they're saying they can only win if people cooperate with health experts. So they have been urging people to wash their hands, keep a social distance, and report health officials of any suspected cases. And this amount of money that you just mentioned that the president has released is supposed to be part of $49 million that the Ministry of Health said it requires to carry out a comprehensive response to this outbreak. So they will be, in the meantime, relying heavily on the support of other international partners. The UK has already released funds, and they're also waiting for vaccines from the US and Japan that are expected next week.
But Chris, the situation gets even more complex as more deadlier strains of the virus are being found out.
That's right. That strain was discovered in the east of the DRC earlier this year in a densely populated area known as South Kyiv province, where there is a mining area. People come to dig for gold. And so the disease, that area is next to the border with Burundi. And experts are saying that this strain, this deadly strain that has been discovered, it's known as Clade 1b, has already spread to Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya. And that, led the World Health Organization to raise an alarm and declare it a public health emergency of international concern. So the DRC government has set up a national task force. They are sending out teams across the country, all the 26 provinces, to try and start finding people who have suspected cases, test them, isolate them, and treat them before the disease spreads further.
All right. Chris Sakaringa, thank you very much for joining us for the moment. Thank you. Moving on, India is commemorating its first ever National Space Day on August 23rd, marking a historic achievement with the successful landing of ISRO's Vikram lander from Chandrayaan-3 on this day last year.
3, 2, 1, 0.
August 23rd, 2023, a day that etched India's name in the annals of space history. On this momentous day, India became the fourth nation to successfully land on the moon and the first to explore its mysterious southern polar region. To honor this remarkable achievement, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi declared August 23rd as National Space Day. President Draupadi Murmu attended the celebrations of National Space Day in New Delhi with a focus theme, Touching Lives While Touching the Moon, India's Space Saga.
स्पेस एक्सप्लोरेशन ने मनुष्य की क्षमता को बढ़ाया है, मानव की कल्पना को यथार्थ में बदला है, ब्रह्मांड के रहस्यों से पर्दा उठाया है। स्पेस एक्सप्लोरेशन रोमांचकारी होने के साथ साथ एक चुनौती भरा कार्य भी है। इसमें अनेक समस्याएं आती हैं। इन समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए किए जाने वाले अनुसंधान विज्ञान के विकास को गति देती है और मानव जीवन को बेहतर बनाती है।
President Murmu hailed the achievements of ISRO and initiatives launched by government for startups in the space sector. She also congratulated ISRO for its upcoming Gaganyaan mission.
ISRO भारत का अंतरिक्ष स्टेशन स्थापित करने की दिशा में आगे बढ़ रहा है। मैं गगनयान मिशन की भी उत्सुकता से प्रतीक्षा कर रही हूं, जिसमें भारतीय अंतरिक्ष टीम को अंतरिक्ष में ले जाया जाएगा। मुझे विश्वास है कि इन सभी मिशन के फलस्वरूप ऐसे परिणाम सामने आएंगे जिनसे देश सामाजिक, आर्थिक एवं वैज्ञानिक रूप से लाभान्वित होंगे।
The success of Chandrayaan-3 has propelled India onto the global stage as a key player in space exploration. Union Minister Jitendra Singh said that India's space sector has put India at the front in the private sector.
And the world never expected that we would be able to achieve this feat, because our journey in space was just about 55 years long. ISRO was born in the year 1969, the year which is remembered for the first human being having landed on the surface of the moon. Within 50 years, just about half a century, we became the first to have landed on the south pole of the moon before anybody else could do.
With fresh investments and growing collaborations with private partners, India's space sector has taken a quantum leap, paving the way for future discoveries and innovations. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
A member of the Economic Advisory Council to Prime Minister, Shamik Aravi, has said that the last 10 years have been economically remarkable for the poorest 20% of Indian population. In a post on X, Shamika Ravi shared state-wise data along with a tweet and said that in financial year 12, 6% among the poorest 20% of India's population owned a vehicle, and this has increased to 40% by financial year 23. The data showed vehicle ownership amongst the bottom 20% of the Indian households, rising the most in Punjab. Among the state's poorest rural households, it increased from 15.5% to 62.5% among Punjab's poorest urban households. The number has risen from 14% to 65.7%. Well, Turtle Conservation Center of Vietnam, named Cuc Phuong National Park, has been rescuing tortoises and freshwater turtles from illegal poaching. Currently, the center is providing care to over 2,000 turtles. And that's it in this edition of DD India Live. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from DD India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Amritpal Singh from my entire team here in Delhi. Thank you for watching DD India Global.